Hello, everyone. Thank you again for staying for our third speaker today. So this afternoon here, we have Tanu Mehta. I believe I said it correctly. I believe, yes, close enough. Tanu is a human resource specialist committed. Sorry, just don't mind me. I'm just letting people in while I'm reading here. So Tanu is a human resource specialist committed to building a positive work culture in organizations. She holds a strong track record of turning around employee engagement levels from the bottom 100 to top 100 places to work for utilizing multiple HR and organization development layers to drive the change. She possesses almost a decade of progressive and industry experience in human resources, currently working as a manager of human resources at Trenton Cold and Storage, responsible for 7 sites in Trenton, 1 site in Toronto, and 2 sites in Alberta, supporting a total of 250 to 300 team members across the company. Prior to this, she's worked for Loyalist College in an HR administrative role, followed by a stint as a part-time professor for HR there as well. Her strong background in learning and development and HR operations makes her the perfect fit. To add to the mix, she's only moved to Canada in 2019. And she has an interesting story to share in how she established her roots here while utilizing her experience from India. Welcome, Tanu.
Thank you so much for the lovely introduction, Brianna. And I want to thank everybody for attending this session. I especially want to thank my reporting manager and my colleagues from my team who are attending this as well on their own accord to support me. And I want to say, I really appreciate what you do for me and for supporting me in all that I take. All right, without further ado, I'll start sharing my presentation. So the topic that I have been provided to cover is hiring, retaining, and managing employees. Let's start with. All right. So hiring, retaining, and managing employees. So here's the agenda. I'm going to cover a little bit about myself, then employment law basics, what you need to know, the full cycle of hiring, training and rewarding employees, that would be your retaining them, and then discipline and attrition, because however we try, however hard we try, there's always something that's inevitable, and that's attrition and even discipline sometimes. So being prepared for it and having the knowledge of it always helps. So let's move on. All right, so about myself, I was born and raised in India, and I've moved to Belleville in April of 2019. So it's going to be 3 years this year. I moved here as a permanent resident. I am married. I have a little daughter who's grown up so much. This is an older picture. She's 3 years old now. I love adventure. Been to more than 12 countries, and some of the things that I've taken on for adventure is bungee jumping, scuba diving, skydiving. I like to read, and I'm a warm person at heart, so I like to meet people, and get-togethers with family and friends are my favorite. About my work experience and my qualifications, I'm working as manager HR at Trenton Cold Storage, which Brianna already mentioned. Take care of about 250 to 300 employees currently, and we obviously want to grow, and that will help. I have close to 10 years of experience in human resources now, a lot of it from India, but now.
Before you continue on, it's almost like your shared screen is frozen, and all I see is the PowerPoint like the original PowerPoint where you can edit in and show, it's not in presentation mode. I'm not sure if that's my end or yours.
Give me a second again.
Yeah, no worries.
Share screen.
I wasn't sure if it just took another couple seconds to load and then another person commented here.
So let's try it again. Are you able to see it as a slide now?
No, I see it as the presenter view.
So,
There, now I just see the slides.
okay. Can you give me a second?
No worries.
I'm sorry.
I understand your frustration because I've done that before too, and I can't remember how to physically walk you through it through my words.
In that display settings, if you, do you have two screens or one?
I do have two screens, and that's what I want to make sure is that maybe I don't duplicate. And
You need to do extend then. So hit extend these displays.
Yep. Was on it. Yep.
And then when you share the screen, you can share the one that's on the full screen side and then have your presenter display up on the other side.
That's perfect.
You think after relying on Zoom and everything, we'd be really good at everything still?
Give me, I'm almost there.
Yeah. I don't know if it helps if you stop sharing and then reshare. That makes any sense. Oh, there we go.
Are you able to see the slides now?
Yes, everything looks great.
Perfect. Okay,
Sorry
thanks
about
that
that.
we got it sorted right away. And I'm so sorry too. I was thinking, should I get this sorted right away when we were on the call earlier, but okay, thanks a lot for bearing with us. So I was talking about my experience, and I have close to 10 years of experience in HR. And a lot of it is from India too. I have 7 years in India and 3 years here in Canada now. I have a master's in human resources. I'm also certified human resource leader from HRPA, which is an Ontario-based organization, and I'm a certified trainer. Okay. Now, here I wanted to talk about how HR has been different in India versus Canada. I've been asked that in both of the interviews I've had here, and Brianna was asking about it. So I do think it's an intriguing experience that I've had, having moved continents, and it's the culture being so vastly different. So there, the answer to that question, how I have answered, is that human resources, the theory, the base, the fundamentals remain the same. Like Maslow's hierarchy wouldn't change. Your leadership principles wouldn't change. In general, even human behavior is quite similar to that extent that I would say that in those terms, all of my education, all of that remains intact. When it comes to law, there are very, very specific things that are different. But I don't know, I find things that are similar too, in the sense that So for example, we have state insurance over there. It's called Employee State Insurance, ESI. It's very similar to WSIB over here. We have Employment Standards Act over here, which determines your hours of work, overtime, all of those details. And those get covered in Factory Act in India. So there's arbitration, there is mediation, all of that is also there in India. So to a general extent, there was quite a lot of similarities. And that is what helped me prepare for like my employment law exam that I took for CHRL or in general, just to have the confidence to be in HR here. And right now I'm at a significant level that I could, if I didn't have that knowledge with me, I would not be able to take the right decisions. But there is a lot of similarities, more than you would think. And I think I put it back to maybe we both were somewhere ruled by the British, wherein that's where we draw our law from. So that's why I think there are those similarities, and that's helped. Now, when it comes to differences, I'll tell you one of the funniest, or like, there are some very specific or basic things that are different. So for example, privacy, it's such a big thing here. You're not supposed to know about anybody's medical health condition, etc. In India, we had a policy to get all of our managers in my previous company, get all of our managers and above, go for a medical test, and we would receive their reports to find out what's wrong with their health. And our company went a step further, and they sent letters to all of our spouses to say, this is what's wrong, and make sure that you take care of your spouses. And you cannot imagine here, that kind of thing happening. Or another example, which it's a smaller one, which is we used to do a lot of things for employee engagement there. And one of the things we did was birthday celebrations, and we would get everybody together, cut a cake, and so on. And I was like, at Loyalist, we were at the time when I was at Loyalist, we were looking for some activities to engage employees, get them together, do something. And I suggested maybe we celebrate birthdays. And I was told, no, people are private about it. And I was like, really? I just couldn't wrap my head around. I could understand how you're private about your age, but it was such a common thing. Like, I think in general, as a culture, my country is a lot more collective, and we just nosy even to that it matter, that we know a lot more about each other. But those are some of the big differences in that sense, in a day-to-day manner. But I was able to pick that up really quickly. And I had good training exposure with Loyalist, and again, my manager here is great. She helped me understand what's the culture is like in this company. And since then, it's been just a good learning experience, and I've been plugging along. So other than that, some of my strengths are building a positive work culture in organizations. And I think Brianna mentioned it, but just to reiterate it again, is when I joined my first company as an HR manager in India, there was a survey which is called Great Places to Work survey. It's quite recognized now. I'm talking about in 2012. Even that survey was a little bit new at that time. But my company had participated then, and we were in the bottom 100 of the companies in terms of ranking. But after continuous efforts of like 3 years, we were able to move to top 100. And it's a long journey. Initially, there were 600 organizations. You can imagine our rank was something in 500s. We weren't even provided a rank because at that time, at that level, you don't get a rank. But eventually to move, to take so many steps and to move to the top 100, it was quite a journey. And I feel blessed to have gotten that opportunity, that challenge, and have done well in that. Apart from that, of course, talent acquisition, that's a part of HR that is one of the most important. You want people, and you want the right people. So there's that, there is retention. When you have them, you don't want to let them go. And then there is engagement and development, because these are the ways you will retain them, right? So moving on to my next slide. I'm sorry. Put things on silent. All right. Okay. So some of the employment law basics, what you need to know. There are, first of all, congratulations that your business is moving so further along that you need to know about employment law and you're hiring people. To start with, these are the two acts that have a lot of requirements at your business level that start even at, once you hit the threshold of 5 employees, once you have a threshold of 20 employees, there are different things that you have to ensure to make sure that you are compliant with the law. So, and apart from that, there are other acts as well that you should be familiar with, but these will lay out most of the requirements that you'll need on a day-to-day basis. Employment Standard Act, it really sets the ground or base level requirements, and it works on the principle of greater right or benefit. So your policies should have to offer the minimum expectations that are set out in Employment Standards Act. You can get better in your offer, or so for example, if they have defined that the minimum wage has to be around $14.15 or $14.75, you can't offer a wage that's lower than that, but you can offer a wage that's higher, right? Similarly, they have defined that the overtime has to be over and above 44 hours in a week. So you can't have a policy where you're giving overtime after 48 hours or so on, right? You have to, it works on the principle of greater right or benefit. So yeah, if your policy provides a better benefit or a greater benefit, then that will be in effect. If your policy does not provide a greater benefit, then you have to follow at least the minimum standard, which is ESA. So that's what ESA does. And Occupational Health and Safety Act, that's really the base, the one purpose of it is to ensure that whatever shape, form, size your employee is coming into work, you make sure that he is able to go, or he or she is able to go back in the same shape, form, or size, which is to ensure their safety and nothing, whether it's mental stress, whether it's physical stress, all of that, you as a business take care of to ensure that they are not impacted. Let's move on to details of some of the things that you will have to do for compliance. Once you have hit the threshold of 5 employees, according to Ontario law, you must have a health and safety representative. You should also have a health and safety policy and program to implement that policy. And then you should have a written workplace violence and harassment policy. I've taken this information from this site, and I'm going to try and share this presentation in a PDF format after the presentation, so that you don't need to take notes right now, but you'll have it available for you. If you go onto this site, you will get to read a little bit more. And I did try and include a template from this site itself so that you can get started. But go ahead and explore from there if you want. They had like 3 or 4 templates available. So you can look at that and go there. Once you have more than 20 workers, a joint health and safety committee made up of both employees and management is the requirement. You should have regular meetings to review your workplace practices. And then you should have health and safety awareness training for everybody. You should have a policy on accessibility and compliance with AODA, which is Accessibility Ontario Disability Act. So all of these things come into play at different threshold of employee levels. And then if you work with hazardous material, you need to complete training in the WMIS. There are some pre-training available. Again, if you try and look for it, especially this site itself had a few things to offer. So go ahead and explore that. But make sure that you're following all these rules. And there are some rules regarding distributing posters of Employment Standards Act minimum, etc. too, that you should be aware of and you should start doing, as and when you hit the thresholds. Here, I want to engage into a dialogue with you guys. I've tried to put in a case study to ask what you think. The slide says every situation is unique. And I again, I stress that no two events in an employment relationship are ever completely the same. The example is in front of you. And the question is, how important do you think the respective ages are in this example? If you can put in your answers in the chat and let me know what you think, that would be great.
We just did our HR training in the office, so do I even need to answer these questions? We literally just finished this, all of us in their office.
So if you have two employees who've joined just recently or at the same time, say a year ago, Michael is 55 and Fred is 20, what do you think should be their notice period or their severance package? What all do you think, and how important would their ages be in this situation? Okay, so Yolanda is saying that not important, tenure is more important, I would say. Okay. Somewhat important because it might be harder for Michael to get a job. That's correct, Marie. Okay. Okay, well, I'll answer this. Basically, as per Employment Standards Act, which is the minimums per se, what's most important is the tenure. Sorry. What's most important is the tenure. But if you go by common law, it determines the amount of severance or notice period based on 4 factors, which is how hard will it be for the employee to find a job, so their age, and then so older employees are entitled to substantially more notice of termination than their younger counterparts, just because it will be harder for them to look for another job at the time. So if you were able to, if you had an ironclad offer letter that saved you and you were able to offer just the employment standards minimum, it wouldn't matter. But if however, it was going for wrongful termination and you wanted to be safe, then it would, then your severance package you would determine based on their ages, because as mentioned earlier, older employees would find it harder. So if you go by common law, that's the scenario. I do think I covered the 4 factors of common law later on as well, so I'll talk to it then. So coming on to hiring, I've tried to capture 4 aspects of hiring in this presentation. There's job descriptions and job postings, interview assessment tests, the reference checks, and then offer letters. So job description. Job description is essential even when you have a small business and you might be thinking, okay, I just need one person, I don't need to go ahead and write a job description. It still is important because first of all, you define the need for yourself, and then the person coming in also knows what is it that you're looking for. The more clear it is and the less confusion there is, the better the employment relationship would be. You would know exactly what you're asking, and they would know whether they can offer that or not, whether they're interested in that or not. There's and once you define the job, you're able to also define, okay, what are the characteristics that I'm going to look for? What are the skills that I would need? What is the, once you have all of that, it will be so much, I would say, aligned and organized to look for a person versus to have a general idea of, okay, I need this, but not having written what all that person would do. So for example, if you're starting a cafe and you're looking for somebody to be a waiting staff, but you also expect them to run the cash register. Those are 2 different skill sets, and having that written down will help you think through, okay, I might want to add this on. I might want them to look after, maybe close the shop on some certain days, so on and so forth. So just writing makes you think through it and ensures that you cover all the aspects, clears expectations, and of course helps you determine the skills, abilities, etc. needed. So the components make sure that you include are a job title, who would they report to, just for clarity purposes, date, written and approved by. These things just help when you go back to a document, it helps make you think, okay, what happened at that point of time. So it's good for documentation purposes. And your summary, duties and responsibilities, and the skills and abilities, these are the meat of the document. This is where you clarify expectations. The one thing that I want to point out is consider human rights legislation when drafting these. Most of the time, you don't even need to put pronouns in there. Like you can say drives or runs the cash register. So you don't need to put the pronouns, but if at all you end up having to use a pronoun, try and be inclusive. Try and make this as an option versus a certain gender. Use job titles that are also gender neutral. That's one of the things that I picked up while researching for today's presentation. So using journey person instead of journeyman, or there was a title assistant to chairman. So even though that person who is coming in is an assistant, but they would know that, okay, there's only a chairman here instead of chairperson. So try and all of your terminologies, whether directly related to the job or not, should be more gender neutral. And something like bilingual proficiency in French and English instead of looking for a French teacher. These are some of the ways to avoid any kind of discrimination lawsuit, because you're not allowed to discriminate based on nationality or citizenship or those things either. Okay. How is a job ad different from a job description? Well, job description is more an internal document, whereas job ad or job posting goes to the person and it has to be attractive. You're trying to sell the position to somebody who's going to be applying. So you want to talk about the salary and the benefits. That's important. They want to know what's in it for them. And at the time when they're looking at a job ad, they don't know your company. They don't know all the extra things that you bring in. And that's your time to shine. That's where you highlight about the company, the culture. That's why that's important. Because salary, of course, is a big factor for somebody who's switching a job. But additionally, if you have things to offer like autonomy, and somebody might be really looking to make a change, make a difference. If you have a really specific or a great benefit package and somebody needs that. So, just highlighting what's unique for your organization and culture will help attract employees. And I know right at the beginning of my career, maybe I should say when I was naive, a lot of thought just came from everybody. Oh, it's just the salary that matters. But over all of the years of experience and all of my training and learning, what I've learned is that, of course, salary matters, you're working for it, but it's not the end all be all, because otherwise only the best paying institutions would be working right now, right? So there's a lot of us and everybody has different needs. So your ad, if it speaks to my need or the potential candidates need, they will apply irrespective of the salary you offer. You be competitive, be in that range. That is not, it is not made difficult for them to apply, but other than that, if you are in the ballpark, other things that you offer would make the big difference. And sometimes it's even the inclusive language in your ad that speaks to them, or sometimes it's the accommodation that you're providing in general that shows, that just aligns with their principles. So talk about all of those things, or mention things that matter to you and that you're trying to create in your organization, and that will help. work schedule matters to somebody, it's if you have it in front of you, if you have it in your mind, might as well put it in there. If you want it to be flexible, if you want to talk about it in the interview, maybe you leave it out at that time. Accommodation, if you're required to, you should always mention that accommodations are available, and you should always find out at the time of screening itself if candidates need accommodation, because that's per law we are required to accommodate and provide accommodation for candidates, right? I'll come to these examples later on. What I want to start with is, this is another small example where I wanted to generate some discussion. I wanted to request if you guys can try and identify some of the errors that you think are there in this particular ad. What would be the impact of those errors? And what do you think, how can we improve this ad? So we can address it one by one. If you want to try and take a kick at what do you think are the errors in this particular ad? Okay, all of these are really great inputs. I'll start with Yolanda. Yolanda has mentioned young seems to be discriminatory. Absolutely on point. You're not supposed to be discriminating on age, and you could actually be, which is the impact of this, is that you could actually face a lawsuit for having a discriminatory ad. Who the business is targeting, young, smart, and waitress. Well, of course, the young, smart, and waitress, waitress is gender specific. You're not supposed to discriminate. There is no reason why you would only ask for a waitress. If it's a waiting staff, it's not a, you're supposed to accommodate until to the point of undue hardship. So to limit your need for people to a certain gender, unless it's required by the most essential part of the role, you're not supposed to limit it. So young, smart is also a very objectifying word that you would want to leave out. I actually want to point out energetic. That I didn't know that it was a contentious word, but yesterday while reading up for this particular presentation, I read that there are certain words that dissuade a certain section to apply. So for example, for disabled people, this might not be as appealing. So you're leaving out a certain section, but definitely young and the waitress, that could lead to a lawsuit against you. The rest of it is okay. And there could be definitely more details to improve the ad. But the biggest problematic areas would be young and waitress. The other thing you could leave out is, are you a recent college graduate? Because that also then forces you to think of young people, not necessarily, but still, versus what you have to really focus on what you need. And I'm going to take you to an example now of a good ad. I might have to exit the presentation more. Okay. So, are you able to see my screen, or are you able to see the screen that I opened? Okay, perfect. So here, this is the keg houses, and it's for a waiting staff then. And You can see how they've addressed them as a server. They've talked about the company's culture, even though it's a big steakhouse, everybody would know. They still take out time to mention what the culture is like, because that's the over and above that employee is looking for when applying. The terminologies that they have used to describe are personality, drive, passion. Those are the words that are more neutral and are not at all discriminatory. So take a look at all of, like a lot of the other ones also were great, but I picked up one of these, and that's what I wanted to point out here. There's some other jobs as well. And the reason why I've put these links in is that when you are drafting your own job description, you would know what to focus on and how you can draft about the culture. Maybe look for other good or great job ad examples from small businesses, even, or latest ideas to make your to really represent your culture and make it enticing for the potential candidates. This one talks about the company. We embody our values in everything we do. We serve with passion, think forward, and play as a team. Like, these are things that could speak to a person at another level, that they would be willing to overlook a certain number of a salary versus just getting a role there and making a difference, living these values. All right, coming back to my presentation. Perfect. There are some best job ad examples that I pulled in as well. If you're an amazing software engineer who wants to make great money working at an amazing company, then keep reading this. And I'm sorry that the next thing that's going to come up, it's going to be hard to read. Oh. Oh. Sorry, just 1 second. I made this change right at the very end, but I wanted to, I kept deciding between the ad that I wanted to share. And this is the one that I decided about. And I want to ask, what is it that you like about this ad? And then I'll discuss the things that you can possibly take away. So it says the people, we have mountain bikers, road bikers, skiers, porters, all of these and every other variety of people. We have family people, single people, happy people. You will find a friend here. And like we said, bring your friends too. Our hiring process, you find or get this job ad, you read the ad, it piques your interest and or make you want to disprove our claims. You tell us you're interested, apply, email, shout, or call. Like that's what this ad is. Tell me, what do you like about this ad? I hope you do like that. That's absolutely great. I want to address, I just noticed that Sarah, you have asked a question. Is it okay if I address the questions towards the end of the presentation, and that way I will, okay, thank you so much, Brianna. I hope you'll help me with the questions at the end. I might lose track of them. Okay, so Sarah has mentioned this ad does show some of the personality of the workplace. Maria said, sounds like a fun and informal place to work where I can make friends. It is not the norm, gets your attention. That's actually right. And the cool action shot photo. Exactly. So those are some of the things. When you say it is not the norm, I would say what speaks to me is that this ad is almost like a conversation that I'm having with somebody instead of reading in third person. Okay, this is available and these are the requirements. It's definitely not a plain Jane. It's definitely out of the norm. And when it speaks to you like a conversation, you get intrigued, you read more. And the more you read, the more it talks about how awesome they are and so on. And you know, it piques your interest that much more. Some of the cool ideas that that you can possibly take. Treat your candidates like they're amazing, because they are. This is a time when you are trying to intrigue somebody and pull somebody. So write the first line. If you remember, if you're an amazing software professional, apply here for getting amazing salary or whatnot. So that's what that is talking about. Lead with what you offer. So in that first line, it was talking about how you would get a great, if you want to make a great salary and a great benefit package, apply here, look further here. Then it describes the steps of your hiring process. That's actually a good takeaway, because that makes it really clear. Most of the times when I've interviewed candidates, they end up asking, okay, what are the next steps? When will I get the next call? You know, and this ad not only encourages, but explains that hiring process per se. Highlight how much you value diversity. They've talked about diversity, but in a very different way. They're talking about it. They're not even bringing gender, sex, or say race or age or all of those things. They're talking about how a person can be a mountain biker, and all of those things don't matter. And there's diversity of mountain bikers, road bikers, skiers, porters, runners, video game heroes. So you don't, it's not leaving it to be really active people only, but just generally having a passion, and family people, single people, happy people, just being very, very inclusive. And then of course, the great real life photo of a fun place that excites you even more, that's proof to what you're saying. Yeah, Sarah, I know this. If you go to this particular link, other examples and ideas for inspiration, this is where I found this ad. I tried to go to the actual ad, which was actually no more running, but I could only access this particular part of the ad. I understand where you're coming from, but irrespective of that, they had this particular part that really appealed to me that I wanted to bring to your attention here. They were hiring for software engineers, and that was the first line I had added previously. It said, if you're an amazing software engineer and looking for some work, just give me 1 second. Or I'll probably address that later on. But there was that line that mentioned the job requirement. If you go to this link later on, you will be able to see this ad and some others for inspiration. But particularly, these are the things that really drew me for this particular ad that you can look to attract people. Okay, interviewer selection process. Prepare for the interview. As much as you are interviewing the candidate, they are going to be interviewing you as well to find out if they are a fit for you or not. So giving them that seamless experience is extremely important. Word of mouth is one of the best ways to publicize your business and to publicize to attract talent. So the better the experience each candidate has, the higher chances of getting more candidates and getting more referrals. Even if somebody is not selected, because you'll not be able to hire everybody you come across, if they get a good experience, they'll still talk good about your company. Some of the important steps for preparation for the interview would be review the resume. You should look for things that make sense, things that you're not sure of. Maybe there are 2 jobs that are overlapping, you're not sure which one was the main job. Did that align more with what you require here in terms of experience? And then you can just looking at it from timelines perspective, looking at if there are gaps that you want explained, looking for things that are written there and things that are missing that you would really, really want. That's what you would do in your reviewing of the resume, but do that beforehand. Prepare questions for the position. Again, an unplanned interview can go in any direction, and you might not be able to assess the real skills, abilities that you wanted for the job. So once you have done the hard part of writing your job description and you know that, okay, I need a team player for an HR role, I need somebody who will be able to work with others, you will want to hire somebody like that, versus if you have a very, I would say, niche kind of role, like an accounting person, you don't need that person to be working with a lot of people. If they really have a very clear understanding of their accounting principles, etc., you're good to go. So it depends on the position and then the skill sets that you're looking for. And based on that, you can ask or then prepare questions around it so that you can ask for examples of those behaviors from the previous experience and go from that. Don't be afraid to ask or clarify concerns with the candidate. This is an important thing that I wanted to mention. In my experience, I have had managers who sit through the interview. We have our questions prepared that we ask, but after the interview ends, they come back saying, oh, I don't know, I'm worried about this particular part. And I'm like, but we can ask that question from the candidate. So as long as it's not an illegal question, it's not around protected grounds, feel free to ask your concerns or clarify your concerns from the candidate. So an example would be that we were interviewing a candidate who also had another part-time job at Walmart. And my manager came back and said, well, I'm not sure if they will prioritize our job, if they will be willing to overstay for, or have, be able to do overtime, etc. And I was like, well, that's a fair question. And we should ask them. And they should rather know that that's an expectation right at the beginning, instead of us struggling later on or just rejecting them without even knowing what their stand is. And we actually have 2 rounds of interviews. So we were able to ask them in the next round, and we mentioned, okay, hey, what about the other role that you have? Who would you prioritize? And we might need you to stay. So how is that going to work? And they said, well, the other job, I'm not interested in that. It's a few hours. I'm looking at maybe 3 or 4 hours in a week to do that eventually. So it's definitely not a priority, and it's extremely flexible. Even if I get a very, very short notice, I'm able to manage. So really a concern, that was a concern in our head. Once clarified, wasn't a concern. So it's worth asking your questions, your doubts, as long as they're not illegal. Explain the role to the candidate. In fact, be candid about the challenges. This is another thing that I've learned through experience, because sometimes you want to just get the applicants, you want them to apply, and once they have the job, it might be different. But on the other hand, instead of that, if they're not fit for the role, they will not stay, and the attrition and the whole act of repeating the whole recruitment process will be so cumbersome that it's worth putting out all the challenges up front so that they know what they are up against. They choose wisely. So, for example, I'll give you an example of my current company, because we are a cold storage firm and people are required to work in the cold. So we are really upfront about it, because having someone come in and later on they are like, oh, okay, it's super cold. What do I do? And having them leave, that would work against us, versus we let them know, okay, it's gonna be really cold. We'll provide you with the freezer suit, etc., to help you keep warm, but you'll have to be, and we give them the temperature range to make it real and to let them know what it is, versus to just get people in and see how they do, because we would have so much higher attrition, and the cost of training them, the cost of bringing them up to speed, and even the cost of all the processes we go through with them, that's much higher than just getting them in the door. So, and it wouldn't work. So being candid about the challenges that they will face. In fact, giving them we kind of try and give them a tour of the place. So whatever makes them more and more clear of the role, the better decision they will take and the better you will be at. Always give the candidate to ask opportunity to ask questions as well. This is just as important. I mentioned before as well that even though it's an interview for them, they are interviewing you as well. But a hidden help with this question is that you can see if the candidate has done any kind of research, or even if they are really intrigued with the position, if they're really, really interested, they will have some good questions to ask, and that will show you their level of interest. Create brand ambassadors. I've addressed this a little bit before as well. You want a positive word of mouth from your candidates, and these days there are reviews present on Glassdoor, free of cost, and all you want is that even if somebody is not selected, they've had at least a good experience, so that your brand value stays intact and in fact increases. Respond to all interviewed candidates. I understand that at an application level, there are many, many candidates, and you can put that even in your job ad that only shortlisted candidates will be contacted. But once you have contacted them, once you have interviewed them, it's basic courtesy that you give them a call back. They've taken out time to interview with you, to engage with you. If you spend 5 minutes in responding to them, that goes a long way in building that brand. Be courteous and caring, especially when you are giving the news of not getting selected for a position. Not all candidates are the same. Some might just accept it. Some might ask for feedback. Some might even get defensive. But at your end, if you can be courteous, if you can, if possible, provide feedback. If you're not able to, still answering them in a manner that's courteous, and not engaging in conflict of any sort, for sure. In that callback is important. Do ask for accommodations and provide those accommodations. And lastly, I want to talk about reference check. So reference check is a must. And I've I can see how someone can feel that, well, if the person himself is providing references, they ought to check out, right? So what's the point? But I want to mention that even though the candidates are providing the references, sometimes they don't check out. Sometimes the questions are so detailed that you still get to know, things to look out for. And I have had experiences where the references don't check out. So doing a reference check just assures you that you are taking the right step, that you can trust the person a little bit more. The half an hour, you just have had a half an hour, 1 hour interview discussion, you're having to go with your gut. So adding anything to add that confidence is really valuable. So do your reference check. But for your reference check, if you can have a set of questions ready again, that will help keep the discussion going forward. Check from different angles. How was the attendance? How was the behavior? Were they disciplined ever? Are there areas that you wouldn't want to put the employee into? What are their strengths, weaknesses? Like there are different ways, but all of those questions, if you have them ready, those will help you have that interview properly as well. And just check out all the things that you would really need. And you can add some of the questions depending on the level of the role. If it's a managerial role, you can ask more about, expectation. How are they managing teams? How engaged was their team? How do they communicate with different people? How do they get along with other people? So having questions ready would help you take the call forward and in a very organized manner as well, and ensure that you don't leave out anything that you wanted to check on. So the next slide. Employment contract or offer letter. Well, everybody knows how important it is. It is an agreement between the employer and the employee. And a good working relationship often starts with a good employment contract. What's included? You should have your company logo, date, contact information, so that it's addressed to that particular candidate, the job details, if there are any contingencies. So for example, would you need a criminal record check, or if this is contingent upon your reference check, if you're making the offer before you have done the reference check. So just putting in your contingencies, the compensation, benefits, and expiration date. I have included an offer letter template. Sorry, just 1 second. Okay. So you can try to use this to begin with. I hope you're able to see the offer letter template. So we are pleased to offer you the position, job title, company name. I have included a termination clause as well. And include your benefits. Here is the expiration date. What an expiration date does is that it puts the candidate on hold for replying by a certain time. There are certain, when you have offered somebody, the ball is in their court. And it does happen that the candidate rejects an offer. So the sooner you get to know, the better. So if you put an offer expiration date, it always puts them in a spot, okay, I have to get back. And you get out of the misery sooner rather than later to find out if somebody is coming in or not. So. Of course, you will be emailed a copy of the template. I will try and include this template, the policy template that I had before, and the presentation, and I'll send it off to Brianna, and she can probably send it off to everybody. All right. I have another question. After 10 years or more of service upon termination of employment, so this is Tyler's clause for termination. And I'll read it out again. After 10 years or more of service, upon termination, the employee is entitled to 10 weeks notice of termination or pay in lieu thereof, and is entitled to receive any benefits that may be entitled to during this time. Now, Tyler's boss wishes to rely on this clause when terminating him and looks to provide him 10 weeks pay. However, over the course of 22 years of service, Tyler has advanced considerably in the company and is now a regional director. Tyler has held this position at the company for past 5 years. Now look over the contract and give your opinion as to whether the company can safely terminate Tyler, provide him 10 weeks notice or not. What's your opinion? Thanks for your response, Marie. Marie says 10 weeks is not enough for 22 years of service. What do you all think? So let's go to the next slide. Under Employment Standard Act, an employee is entitled to 1 week of notice per year of service up to 8 years, with 8 weeks notice being the maximum or payment in lieu. So as per Employment Standards Act, that's the maximum that you need to give. But as I've mentioned before, Employment Standards Act only mentions the minimum requirement. The clause was written pretty nicely, but the bigger problem with Tyler's contract is that his job changed over years and the contract was probably not renewed. If we are looking back at a contract that was for a different position altogether, that wouldn't hold up. And once it's challenged and it becomes a wrongful dismissal, he would be entitled to a much higher notice period under common law. In my study so far, I've found that under common law, the notice period can go even from 1 year to 2 years. And these are the factors that they consider in common law. Having said that, if they included, if they had revised his contract on a timely basis and ensured that the language for termination clause was perfect, they would be able to go with 10 weeks of pay. So Eileen, you're absolutely right. 1 week of every year. There isn't an industry standard per se, but as I mentioned before, there is common law that comes into play. And definitely you should have your contracts revised on a timely basis is the reminder here. All right. I just quickly want to touch upon the right to participate, right to refuse, and right to know, the 3 basic rights of OSHA. So the right to participate is that when I've mentioned that you should have in your health and safety committees a representative from employees as well as management, that's the right to participate, that the employees get a chance to see and evaluate the hazards that could be present, and then how we are going to go to control those hazards or remove those hazards. So they have the right to participate in that. The right to refuse. What right to refuse allows is that if somebody deems that a particular job is dangerous and they can then refuse to do that job, they would still get paid. So an alternative with the employer is that they offer them another job for the time being. And I have 2 questions that originate from right to refuse. The first question is, what do you think? Can the employer offer this refuse job, like a job that someone has said, I will not do it because I think it's unsafe? Can the employer go ahead and offer that job to someone else? What are your thoughts? If somebody has said that a job is dangerous, I don't want to do it, I think for such and such reason, they give you the reason. Are you allowed to ask someone else to do it? So Yolanda has said no, Eileen has said not if it's dangerous. Marie has said yes, as long as they tell the second person, the first person has refused. I believe that they can, but they do have to inform person 2 that the job has been refused. That's absolutely correct from Sarah and Marie. That's called right to know. If somebody refuses a job and you want to offer it to someone else, you have to let them know that it was refused and for what reasons. However, when Eileen say not if it's dangerous, see, if it's dangerous is the part which is not determined yet. It's employee 1 feeling that it's dangerous. But if in your determination it is not, you can't force employee 1 to still do it. However, you can offer the other employee and ask them to perform it, having let them know that it was dangerous. I might feel something is dangerous because I'm not trained. Another person who's trained might be. Exactly. That's one example of it. That's actually a good example of it, that that you might not feel trained enough, and there is another person who is trained. But as long as you let the other person know, and he or she can decide for himself or themselves whether they want to go ahead and still take that job or not do it. Apart from that, so the first person who is waiting, who is not doing that job, it is your duty to assign them to do some other job, so that because they are still entitled to their pay. And secondly, so there was another question that I wanted to ask, which was, there are certain professions which have limited right to refuse work. And those examples of those professions are like a nurse or a firefighter or a policeman. So when I say limited right to refuse, what do you understand by that? Or what are the conditions? So let me phrase it in a different manner. So when I say limited right to refuse, they're not able to refuse work for dangerous situations. So for example, when there are COVID patients, nurses cannot say, I will not take COVID patients because I think it's dangerous. But they have certain conditions in which they can refuse work. Or a policeman saying, I will not go into the situation because I think it's dangerous. It's a hostile situation or whatnot. They're not allowed to refuse work like that. So what do you think when I say they have limited right to refuse, or what are those conditions? Can you think of some examples in which they can refuse to work? So one of the examples that I am able to always think of is, if they're not provided the right PPE, they can say, I can't do this. A policeman not having a bulletproof jacket and being asked to handle a terrorist situation could say, I will not do this. Or the nurses not being provided the proper PPE and having to deal with COVID patients could say, I will not do it. So that's when their right to refuse would kick in. Brianna, can you confirm that? Because on my screen, I am seeing not the general view. Like from my side, I have the presentation mode on.
I just see the presentation, how you're supposed to see it.
Okay.
All right.
All right, perfect.
I do want to mention we have 7 minutes left.
Oh, yep. Okay. I will speed up.
We can flow over a little bit into our 15-minute break. But I
will. The next few slides are more. I'll be able to complete this in the next 7 minutes. Thanks for the reminder. Onboard and train for success. Well, once you have had the person come in, onboarding and training forms the next most important sections. Up to 20% of staff turnover occurs within first 45 days of employment if they feel that the expectations are different than what they were told, if they don't feel that they have not been trained enough, if they find the culture is much different. So a weak onboarding or a weak training process is what leads to this attrition most of the time. So having a strong onboarding process in place, sharing more about the company. The job ad is just a trailer. Now you get to speak to them. Now you get to address these things in details. yes, this is more than just orientation. Brad is very correct. It's not just about getting the paperwork done, although that's one of the important things you do there. And getting your mandatory trainings covered there as well is an important one. What's additionally important is that you let them know of specific policies that you run. If there are any employee assistance program, if there is an expectation in terms of if your culture is, if the words that we used previously, like it's a cool working place, or you want to have a very formal style of work, either way, just explaining that right at the beginning, that's one part. But then having a strong training post the orientation so that the new candidate feels equipped to be able to handle the task eventually. Check in at regular intervals. So this goes beyond the first 2 days as well. You should check in after a week, after a month, and after 3 months to make sure that you keep getting their feedback, and if they need more support, it right away instead of having lost them after, within the early stages. All right. This is one way. This would be one slide for, I would say, retention or retaining employees, is to focus on and having a very strong onboarding process. Reward and recognition. I'm not going to talk about Maslow's too much in detail, just the fact that I think I've addressed it a little bit before, is that what Maslow proposed is that everybody has these 5 needs, and each need, once it's filled, you move on to the next need. So at first, my first need would be, I would look for food, water, warmth, like, physiological needs. Once that's met, I would need safety or security. And once these things are given, that's when the next thing that I would look for is having a friendly atmosphere or environment around me. This is how you can approach, selling your job, is to have all these needs present and met for your employees, and have your rewards based around that, because that's where the idea of rewarding and recognition comes into play, is that the salary and all is minimum. Everybody wants that. But beyond that, if you're able to engage employees through other means, having a good culture, having a reward and recognition system in place, having regular check-in with your employees, those are the things that will help ensure that they retain and they stay with you. These are some of the ideas that I picked up, but the idea to show the slide to you guys is that there's lots of ideas present. Choose what works for you or your organization. You can even go and ask your team members what is it that they would like for a reward, whether it's a gift card or whether you think setting up a dinner with the CEO, what is it that they would like, sending a surprise package to their home address. These are small things that show you care, and then they start to care. All right. Discipline. Following the hot stove rule. So this is something that I learned during my college, and it stayed with me forever. Discipline has 4 aspects, and there is an analogy to using hot stove. So when you touch the hot stove, you burn your hand. The burn is immediate. Will you blame the hot stove for burning your hand? No. Immediately you will understand the cause and the effect of the offense. So discipline should be directed against the act, not somebody. You get angry with yourself, but you know that it was your fault. You might get angry with the hot stove too, but not for long, as you know it is your fault. So, and you learn your lesson quickly. So the discipline has to be immediate, the way when you touch hot stove, the burn is immediate. The second thing is, you had warning, as you knew the stove was red hot, and you knew that what would happen to you if you touched it. You knew the rules and regulations previously issued to you by the company, prescribing the penalty or what would happen. and you still did it. So having that warning or letting people know of the rules or regulations, that's important. That's part of the discipline. If they come back saying I wasn't trained or I had no idea this was existing, then disciplining them wouldn't be the right step. So making sure you have rules and regulations in place and making sure that they are trained on it would ensure that you're following the right steps of discipline. The discipline is consistent. Every time you touch the hot stove, you get burned. So consistency in discipline is also of prime importance. And lastly, the discipline is impersonal. So whoever touches the hot stove gets burned, no matter who he is. So furthermore, he gets burned because of not because of who he is, but the act of touching the hot stove. So it's really, remember, the discipline has to be against the act, not against the person. And separating act from the person is an important part of discipline. Document, I'm pretty sure you must have heard about it before, but as they say it, if it's not documented, then it did not happen, because then you get into he said, she said. So whatever you do, here are the parts of progressive disciplining: counseling and verbal warning. If the same mistake is repeated again, or in same general area it's repeated again, then you go to written warning, you go to a suspension and final written warning, and finally there is the termination. So that's how you can follow progressive discipline and have documentation for each of these steps to ensure that you have given enough chances to correct somebody and so on. All right, this is my last slide. Expect and prepare for turnover. And when I say prepare for turnover, it's at that point when somebody has decided that they want to move on. It's time for you to find out and introspect if you can avoid that for other employees. But you can overcome those reasons and ensure that it doesn't happen for someone else. So try to interview and find out the reasons for the exit. Again, there are exit interview questions available if you try and Google them, and have yourself prepared with your set of questions that you would like to ask, but trying to find out why they're leaving, what is it that they liked about the company. That will help you improve yourself and better yourself. Of course, the person has already decided to leave. Do not engage in a conflict. You can try and address something if it's extremely wrong and you want to, but I think being the bigger person and just approaching this discussion with an open heart and listening mind would help you just figure out how you can ensure that it doesn't repeat. And always have a set of questions available for you. Thank you. That's my presentation. Thanks a lot for being patient with me, especially with the problems that I have with slides. I'm happy to take questions now.
So the one question that Sarah had was, I understand that employers are supposed to accommodate to undue hardship. We aren't hiring people yet, but we cannot guarantee an accessible workplace due to being a service company working in people's homes. How do we handle that?
Accommodation is such a, as I said earlier, it will be so situation dependent. Every situation is unique, and accommodation is the biggest example of that. There might be different kind of accommodations that somebody needs. Just addressing that and acknowledging that you will try and provide accommodation is the most important part. So an example is somebody who wanted to work here just needed accommodation. They weren't able to speak properly. And they said that during the interview process, they wanted, I don't know what the technical word is, but a person, an organization who helps translate their speech, a person be present with them for that. And that's an accommodation that you can provide, right? So it might be as simple as that. It might be more technical as to um, if you're not, if it's an infrastructural need and you're not able to provide it, there can be still other ways. Maybe it's just for the interview that they need something, and you can say maybe we do a Zoom call instead or a Teams call instead, so on and so forth. So it's so situation dependent that you have to engage with them to find out what's the accommodation that they need, or what is their restriction really, because sometimes you can come up with another solution as well. So what's important to know is, okay, what's your restriction? I need someone else to translate, and you might have somebody who speaks sign language or something like that. So you might want to use that. So just giving you an example, but knowing restriction and then trying to work with it is how you would go about it. That's my answer. Wondering with regards to not including age and job ads, how do you approach when you have funding from the government through Canada Summer Jobs and there is an age category? So I am not sure. If you give me an example, I'm not sure if I understand the question properly.
Is it more so like a summer student for someone during the summertime? Is that what you're trying to get across there, Alexa?
Right, so it's funding that you receive from the government for summer jobs, but the applicants have to be under 30. So I just wonder how you get that across without it coming as like being, a detriment. But that's how the funding works.
Is it under 30 for students returning back to school in fall?
No, actually, they removed that restriction, so they don't have to be returning to school or even have any secondary, post-secondary, because now it's just more for, they still call it some for students, but it's not. It's actually just to try to get people like job experience, but they have to be under 30.
I think if you mention it that this is the requirement, you mentioned that this is a position that you got from a grant, and then the actual clause from the grant, that how it reads. I mean, if it specifies only candidates under 30 will be eligible for this kind of position, if you put it as the clause that there is, then I think you will be fine.
Okay, thank you very much.
You're welcome.
I also will provide everyone's, if Tanu's okay with it, your contact information. So if they wish to reach out to you, that they can do so. Okay, perfect.
Yes.
I will definitely do that. So, so if there's any questions that you forget, or all of a sudden you're like, oh, I really want to ask that question, you will have her contact information. So if you do wish to reach out to her, you're more than welcome to do so. We have a question here: a specific day off for religious reasons. I think that's more of a statement, but I think you can. Well, if anyone wants to take a quick break, if you want to have any questions for Tanu, you're more than welcome to ask the questions. But if you want to take a quick break, and we'll resume back here at 1:45. And we've got our next speaker, Jack Veach, and he will be discussing mental health in the workplace.
I just wanted to take a minute and say thanks again for listening to me and for engaging in the conversations. I really appreciate having had this opportunity. Thank you so much, everyone.
Thank you so much, Tanu. I really appreciate it. And I believe Mary Sullivan over there is your boss or coworker?
Yeah, she is.
She was right.
That's why her answers are perfect. Thank you so much, Brianna, and thank you, Marie, and thanks everyone.
Take care.
Yep, you too. Bye-bye.